Amnesia Rebirth came out recently, and being a fan of the first game, I decided to pick it up. At times, Rebirth improves upon the best of the Dark Descent, but at others it feels like Frictional games forgot what made the original so great. The Dark Descent is by no means a perfect game, but its first half comes pretty close. It breathed new life into the survival horror genre, and almost single-handedly popularized Let's Plays. The game was a sensation when it came out, and its popularity is backed up with some pretty great design. Rebirth takes place in 1937, around 100 years after the first game, in the same Algerian locale alluded to in the Dark Descent. You play as Tazi, a French drafter working in a colonized Africa. Unfortunately, before the game can start, the first hour or so is plagued by unskippable cutscenes. It begins with a 5-minute plane crash sequence that leaves Tazi with amnesia, and hints at a strange and ominous sickness.
Salim, it's just turbulence. It'll settle down soon.
Yes, I know. It's hard though. You know, your head tells you one thing, but your heart disagrees.
Algiers, can anyone read me? Mayday! Mayday! This is the song. Do you read?
Okay, hold on.
Come on, stay with me, baby!
Once we eventually leave the plane, Rebirth sees fit to take control away and present us with static images and narration.
Wait, Hank.
But we've no choice.
Stopping and starting the game like this doesn't let it gain any momentum, and as the game goes along, it increasingly breaks the tension.
You and I can sit on him while the doc takes a look. Don't worry. The caves aren't far.
I thought the solution to this problem was pretty obvious, so tell me what you think.
Wait, Hank.
But we've no choice. We need to get them to shelter.
I know. It's Salim. He's hurt. You know what he's like.
Let's get him down there, then you and I can sit on him while the doc takes a look. Don't worry. The caves aren't far.
The Dark Descent handled itself much better in this respect. Daniel has self-inflicted amnesia, and much like Tazi, his memories come back to him as he retraces his own steps. At certain points, Daniel experiences flashbacks which allow the player to piece the story together, but these never take away control. If a player wants to read a note, that action must be initiated by them. It's not forced. The mandatory flashbacks not only develop the story, but they also provide useful gameplay information. For example, upon entering the second hub area, a gust of wind leads us over to this room, where a flashback then draws attention to the elevator.
You have an ascending room. Will it take us to the inner sanctum?
It will definitely take care of the vertical part of our journey. So, you have ridden an elevator before?
The player probably tries to open the ornate machine room door at this point and finds that it's locked. The flashback not only develops the characters of Alexander and Daniel, but it gives us our next goal. Players are given a good reason to care about the story in the Dark Descent, and it might pique their interest enough to dig into the well-written pieces of lore that are scattered all around. What confuses me is that Rebirth has these Dark Descent-style flashbacks, and they're well done, but it also insists on taking control away. This happens excessively at the beginning and end of the game, and it feels like the story is an enemy at times. From a purely literary standpoint, Rebirth is well written, but the story is often at odds with the actual game. Scaring a player hinges on them being immersed, not in the abstract story of a character in the world, but in their own experience of the world as their character. Once Rebirth begins in earnest, we're introduced to the game's newly tweaked lighting system. The Dark Descent used tinder boxes to light candles and torches, but Rebirth uses matches, which double as a mobile light source. They burn for a very short time and can be blown out if you move too quickly with one. Most areas are very dark, and sources of light are rare, so there's a tremendous weight placed on light sources. Fuel is balanced so that you're constantly about to run out, and this keeps the tension high. The sanity indicator is also more ambiguous this time around, so you can never be sure if your sanity versus light trade-off is a good decision.
There's something... My eyes... Oh. What's wrong with me?
Unfortunately, the game offsets this positive change with a new and confusing mechanic.
This thing on my wrist, it feels alive.
The bracelet on Tazi's arm is an amulet that allows her to move through rifts in space. It's an odd mechanic that isn't even really utilized. The rifts are telegraphed with a blue glow, and they only appear as a narrative device, a way to get from point A to point B. There are no puzzles that use it. The more mystical aspects of the Dark Descent were at their best when they were only alluded to, and the same is true here.
Alexander, is it inside the castle?
In a manner of speaking. Come, bring the lamp. You've been to the refinery, have you not?
I don't believe I have. Is it connected to the... what did you call it?
The inner sanctum. My most precious chamber, Daniel. And it lies well beyond the refinery. In fact, it lies beneath the very stone of Brennenburg.
Both Amnesia games, I'm pretending Machine for Pigs doesn't exist, are prefaced with the shaky mental state of their protagonists, and this kept the Dark Descent grounded, at least for a while. Although there are monsters, we can never know for sure that they're real until they attack. There are even some monsters in the first game that aren't real. Rebirth, on the other hand, leans hard into its mysticism, and this is largely to the game's detriment. However, there's a huge success early on, when Tazi first travels into the other world. We move through strange, densely fogged architecture, populated with laboring, petrified bodies. They jump out of the fog. They look like monsters. It's very difficult to see in this place, and my disorientation compounded with the tension of the area to really put me in Tazi's shoes.
What happened to them? All dead.
The sound design is consistently Rebirth's best quality, and it really comes to the fore in these dark, quiet sequences. Unfortunately, the game returns to its more mystical side at the end of this sequence, and Tazi slides into an interactive cutscene involving a giant fetus and a Mario 64 skybox.
I'm here.
No. No, no, Alice! Alice!
My problem with these things isn't that they're badly written or aren't well considered. Frictional clearly cared about the world they were developing. But Amnesia Rebirth is a game. The amulet is never used in an interesting way, and it disappears after the first hour or so. The giant fetus isn't scary, it's fucking silly. The fact that it's scary for Tazi just drives a wedge between player and character. The early sections of Rebirth also jump around way too much to establish any of this stuff. A sense of place is sorely lacking early on, and this completely ungrounds the game. After throwing a cabinet door at a giant baby, we make our way into the fort, and this is definitely a high point. The fort replicates and improves upon the best of the Dark Descent. Our central challenge here is to make a shell to fire through the door of the fort.
Hello?
That's the doctor.
Hello?
The game's sound design guides us effortlessly into the barracks, where the space is dark, tight, and maze-like. The enemies in Rebirth are much more agile than those in the Dark Descent, and this fact is telegraphed very well. The ghoul in the barracks is first seen sprinting across a corridor, and then skittering around the tunnels that it dug in the walls.
Shit! Shit!
Now, this first encounter is something of a haunted house. There's not very much real danger involved here, but Amnesia is very good at making the player stew in their own fear. Tension builds as you hear the creature in the walls, and there are destroyed objects and gore scattered around, along with some foreshadowing letters and flashbacks. At the same time, the puzzle-solving elements compel you onwards. Although the Dark Descent setting and enemies are more to my taste, Rebirth really capitalizes on its premise in the fort, and it briefly restores that puzzle horror rhythm of the Dark Descent.
Hello? Hello, doctor, are you there?
Yes, yes, I'm here. Eva, is that you?
Oh, thank God. It's Tazi. Tazi Trianon.
It's Triana. Tazi. Are you well?
Yes. Well, no. Not really, not at all.
We have found help. People, a village. But Yasmin, she's not well. The fort. Yes, the fort. Go through the mountain pass, and it is maybe an hour beyond there.
The mountain pass. Yes, yes, I see the village here on the map. Oh, thank God. But, doctor, please, there's something else.
The tension is spoiled immediately when Tazi outright says,
I think it stopped.
if this creature just kept banging on the door, or even went quiet, our safety would feel ambiguous and temporary, like it really would be in this situation. With Tazi's declaration of safety, she basically says, "This is a game, and the enemy will not spawn on this map." I'm nitpicking to some extent, but it seems like a totally unnecessary addition, and it broke my immersion. The game is full of little issues like this, and they all compound to make the game feel weak and watered down at times.
Sulfur, saltpeter, charcoal.
The game falls into a nice rhythm of puzzle solving and scares for a while after this, and the cistern beneath the fort gives us a number of less scripted encounters with the ghouls. Rebirth has a lot of enemy encounters, and each is treated as an obstacle. You have to outsmart them to progress. This is deeper than the run and hide and wait gameplay that much of the Dark Descent relies on, but I think a few more varied kinds of enemy encounters would make the game more interesting and unpredictable. Basically, every encounter puts Tazi in a room or series of parallel hallways with some cover and one or two patrolling enemies. It's not a bad formula, but the repetition causes it to lose potency, especially since many of the game's environments are very similar. Before we move on, I have to mention another new mechanic. After the fetus cutscene, Tazi discovers that she's pregnant.
Oh shit. Shit, I remember. I'm pregnant. Oh, Salim. I remember telling him.
This was a bold and, I think, ultimately successful choice for her character. We aren't expected to empathize with Tazi because she talks about being pregnant, but because we get to interact with the baby. Mechanically, it's quite simple. You press X to rub your stomach, but it endears you to the baby because interacting with it rewards you with some sanity. Although reducing a character to their function in this way might seem insensitive and crass, successful storytelling in games has to be built on the actual systems that undergird the game. In the same way an effective movie is bound by its visuals, games ultimately succeed or fail based on the unity of gameplay with everything else. Everything flows through gameplay, so to speak. Elements that don't enhance the game as a game are superfluous, though this doesn't necessarily make them bad. Tazi succeeds as a character because her struggles are built into the game. Her illness contextualizes death and gives it some continuity. These are certainly simplistic mechanics, but they work well and they don't disrupt the game's momentum. Once she escapes the sewer, Tazi ends up back in the other world, and the game takes several falls that it never quite recovers from. In In The Dark Descent, the antagonist is a being from the other world, but this is only revealed explicitly near the end of the game. It was arguably the worst part of The Dark Descent, and Rebirth takes a turn that is at best confusing and at worst comedic. It morphs into a puzzle game with aliens. Threats aren't present for most of the Otherworld sections, and its visuals leave a lot to be desired. Far from the desolate hell world shown earlier, the architecture and lore of the Otherworld mixes Lovecraft, sci-fi, and fantasy into one undifferentiated blob. At times it reminds me of the Dwemer architecture in Skyrim, and the puzzles are evocative of a very simplistic Portal level. It's unclear why an alien society would use mobile pyramids to transmit power, rather than some sort of wire. Lore in the area features characters with names like Atharu, Karangi, and Kita.
There was a white sun at the Great Gate. If any find this record, know that I was the traitor Kita, alchemist, apprentice to Tamako. Forgive us our folly.
There's teleporter technology,
Paris.
fantasy-tinged batteries, and a sequence with an alien tram ride.
No. I swear we have no goddamn luck.
It's unclear in these areas if Rebirth is even trying to be a horror game, although there are some gestures toward body horror which are ultimately too much for the game's dated graphics.
God. Even if you can hear me, I don't know how to get you out. I'm not so sure about this.
There are a lot of great ideas in the Otherworld. Its denizens extract energy from people by torturing them, and this echoes Alexander's actions in The Dark Descent.
Let's see what you have to offer. What a mess. I should have sharpened the saw. But I can sense it. It's definitely there.
You even have the option of participating in this to help the baby. These lantern enemies are well designed, but turn from scary to annoying in an overlong stealth section. About a third of Rebirth is spent in the Otherworld, and it's a confusing addition that feels at odds with the parts that take place in the desert. The only explanations I could come up with are either that Frictional wanted to make a different game, or they thought the Dark Descent's story really did need to be expanded upon. Unfortunately, Rebirth's strong point is Tazi's horrifying experience in the desert, and none of the other world sections are necessary to that. Generally, less is more in horror mythology, and the mysterious orbs of the Dark Descent really didn't require any explanation, and certainly not this much. Speaking of the Dark Descent, the mid-game is broken up by a detour to the dig site that kicked off the first game. Once again, it presents the classic Amnesia setup. We need to fix a teleporter that will get us to the town where the doctor is waiting for us, and there are a number of complications in the way. If you can accept the conceit of magical teleporters, this is one of the best parts of the game. There's a particularly notable encounter with a couple of Tazi's colleagues, who were afflicted with the same bizarre, mutating illness that she is.
Richard. In here.
God, that's it. That's it. God, it hurts. That's it. Come on. Get out. They'll catch us. They'll catch us. Unless...
Richard!
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm
If the other world only existed in optional notes, the alien architecture here might have had some effect, but there's no strangeness or mystery when we've already traveled to the sci-fi alchemist torture universe. Not much of note happens there, so let's just skip on ahead.
Marie!
Leading up to the game's climax, Tazi escapes the other world and finds herself about to give birth. She then has to make a difficult trek to meet up with the doctor. It's a great sequence, but it's diminished by the unreality of the rest of the game. The short trek through the village made me realize just how close to greatness Rebirth is. This scene would have been particularly effective had the last 2 hours not been a cheap sci-fi novel.
No. No, please, God. Mother Mary, not now. What the hell have I ever done to you? Who's there? Who's there? Help me! Help me, please! Tazi? Yasmin? Yasmin! Please. Please get me down. My water's broke. I need the doctor.
I killed them.
What?
I killed them. All of them. They were trying to help, but they saw my face, and I could taste their fear.
Fuck. No. 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 Yasmin, please don't. I'll help you. I'll try. Where's the doctor?
I don't know. He was with me when I...
What happened to you? What happened to all of us?
It's all broken up. The tower. We were in the tower. She saved us from the desert.
Who is she?
I don't know. A ghost. A god. She only wanted to help.
It was her. She did this to us?
It didn't need to happen, Tassie. She was trying to help you. I can't remember. I'm sorry. It's trying to take me again. Oh, we must be quick. Quickly! It's coming. Oh, it can smell you. Run! Cassie, run now! Run, Cassie! I can't control it! Cassie, it was you! You did this!
I'm here, Tessie.
Doctor!
I've got you.
The baby. She's coming.
It's all right. It's all right. I'm here. I've got you. Good. Now, Tassie. Whoosh, now. That's it.
Long story short, the doctor wants to sacrifice the newborn baby because he thinks it will cure everyone, so he runs right back into the other world. As we pursue him, Tazi is assaulted with cutscene memories that reveal she caused the strange sickness by giving water from an otherworld fountain to herself and her crew.
Die. Don't listen, Tazzy. It's all right.
Please. Goddess. Queen, whatever you are. He's dying.
You know my terms, Tazi Channel. Have you changed your answer?
It's interesting to think about whether the monsters in Rebirth were all humans once, and what Tazi becoming one of them means, but the game never really capitalizes on this. There's a little more sci-fi puzzling, and then we meet with the Empress, who's been alluded to a few times throughout the game.
I see you, you piece of filth!
She will not
Bastard!
answer.
What have you done with her?
You must listen to her. I am trying to save...
What are you?
Have no fear, Tazi Driano. I have no wish to hurt you or your child.
Then let us go! With the portal I can take her home.
She will die. You do not remember?
The child will be born with a sickness. It will waste her to nothing. Here with me, she can live. Here, there is hope.
Follow. I will take you to her. Look at yourself, Tazi. You have become a harvester. Soon your mind will be nothing but hunger. You can do no more for her, but I can. You must let me be her mother.
At this point, we can choose one of three endings. Take the baby and leave the baby with the Empress,
I've got you. Mama's here.
or kill everybody.
This is it, Amari. If we do this, this is the end.
I've waited until now to actually explain Tazi's sickness, because I thought it would tie in with the ending. It's the one mystery that the game doesn't spoil, which I think was a good choice. Every time you die in Rebirth, a sort of hazy cutscene plays, where Tazi runs through the area in a rage. Her illness seems to be triggered by fear or anger, and it's clear that it causes her to lose control of herself a little bit more every time it breaks out. Each death also makes Tazi look worse. Her arms are focused on in particular, and it's a convincingly gross effect.
Look at me. Oh God.
If you die a couple of times in an area, all the enemies despawn, which I thought was a consolation, just to keep the ending from being ruined by bad luck in one area. It seemed clear to me that giving each death continuity in this way was leading up to something. But it doesn't. Every player gets to pick whichever ending they want. There's a similar issue with the laudanum, which prominently warns expecting mothers not to drink it. There is absolutely no payoff to these mechanics, and it retroactively degrades the whole game. The long death cutscenes were no more than an annoying punishment, and that laudanum that could have helped you actually had no effect on the unborn child. The torture section I mentioned earlier also supposedly affects the baby, but this is ultimately hollow as well. Admittedly, a stillbirth would be a pretty dark ending to the game, but it seems like a necessary inclusion if Rebirth is going to pretend you can harm the baby. It's difficult to criticize Rebirth too much because there are genuine grasps toward greatness here, but moments of perfect harmony are spoiled by dissonance between Tazi and the player, a muddle of different genres and styles, enemy encounters that quickly get stale, and a set of mechanics that seem consequential but have no payoff at all. The game simply tries to do too much at once, and it ends up breaking under the weight of its own story. People will come back to it for its high points, and the lows certainly aren't low enough to quit over. I'm being hard on it because the Dark Descent showed a developing mastery over the kind of narrative survival horror games that Frictional make. It was popular for a very good reason, and it influenced many horror games released since. The main feeling I'm left with is one of disappointment. Rebirth comes very close to being just as good as the Dark Descent, but it stumbles. It's a game replete with good ideas, but it just never quite manages to capitalize on them.